At the height of her fame, Li Yuchun wasn't just a superstar. She was a cultural reset. A singer who shattered gender expectations, rewrote the rules of Chinese pop culture, and built an empire worth more than $80 million before she even turned 30. She was everywhere, on billboards, on global runways, on the biggest stages in China, embraced by both the fashion world and state media as the face of a new, modern generation. And then, without warning, she vanished. No scandal, no public disgrace, no official explanation. One year, she was the most talked about icon of her time. The next, she became a ghost, drifting silently through the background of an industry she once dominated. For fans, her disappearance felt impossible. For insiders, it felt intentional, because behind the glamorous campaigns, the political endorsements, and the meticulously constructed image of a model youth, Li Yuchun was standing at a crossroads. Between an entertainment system tightening its grip and an identity that refused to fit the new mold being enforced on public figures. Why did one of China's most marketable, government-approved superstars suddenly lose her place on the national stage? What happened in the years after 2014 that turned a cultural phenomenon into a name that media rarely touched again? Tonight, we uncover the silent pressures, the shifting political winds, and the unspoken boundaries that pushed Li Yuchun out of the spotlight. When Li Yuchun exploded onto China's national stage in 2005, she didn't rise. She detonated. Supergirl was expected to be a simple singing competition, but her appearance transformed it into the most politically disruptive talent show in Chinese television history. More than 400 million viewers watched as a young woman with cropped hair, a neutral wardrobe, and a quiet defiance dominated the votes week after week. She didn't fit the traditional template of a female idol. She didn't smile on command. She didn't soften her presence to appear delicate. Instead, she embodied a generation of youth who were discovering that identity could be built outside of expectations. Her victory wasn't just a win, it was a cultural moment. It symbolized a shift in who the public was willing to crown. Her rise continued with unprecedented speed. Albums topped charts, concerts sold out nationwide, and her fan base, known for its intensity, grew into one of the largest in all of Asia. She wasn't marketed as a singer alone. She became a movement. Her androgynous fashion reshaped mainstream aesthetics. International luxury brands saw in her something rare, a Chinese celebrity with global appeal. Independent of traditional feminine stereotypes, she walked runways, fronted global campaigns, and collaborated with fashion houses that previously reserved their endorsements for established European stars. Financially, her empire expanded just as quickly. She secured multi-million-dollar deals, major film roles, and continuous commercial partnerships. By the early 2000s, her estimated earnings had soared past $80 million, making her one of the highest-paid artists in the country. Yet, what made her unique was not her income, fame, or reach. It was the cultural power she wielded simply by being herself. Li Yuchun's influence touched a deeper nerve in Chinese society. To millions of young fans, she represented authenticity in a world of rigid standards. She offered an alternative to the hyper-feminine mold long imposed on women in the entertainment industry. Her very existence challenged established norms, and that challenge, intentional or not, made her not just a star, but a symbol. But symbols, especially ones shaped by individuality rather than institutional design, eventually become difficult for a controlled entertainment ecosystem to manage. As Li Yuchun's image grew more influential, the system began watching more closely. Her widespread impact, once celebrated, slowly started to look like something less convenient, and the forces that had helped build her empire were beginning to shift in ways no one inside the industry could ignore. As Li Yuchun's fame surged beyond anything China had witnessed since the rise of its first-generation pop stars, she began to occupy a space far more complex than that of a regular celebrity. She was no longer just the winner of Supergirl or a chart-topping singer. She became a cultural ambassador for a new kind of identity. And in a country where cultural identity is carefully curated, that distinction carried weight and consequences. In the years following her historic win, regulators and state media initially embraced her. She represented a modern urban generation, confident, fashion-forward, and globally aware. Her success fit neatly into a narrative of China's cultural rise, where young icons were meant to symbolize national progress. She was invited to perform at government-affiliated galas, selected for public campaigns aimed at youth engagement, and frequently highlighted as a model example of talent shaped by China's system. For a brief moment, she was exactly the type of figure state media liked to promote. A homegrown superstar with clean branding and international appeal. But the image that made her valuable also made her unpredictable. Her androgynous style, celebrated by the public as refreshing and authentic, became increasingly difficult to package within the official framework of positive energy. China's entertainment industry has long relied on clear gender binaries to maintain aesthetic order: the elegant, graceful woman and the disciplined, masculine man. Li Yuchun threatened that structure simply by existing. Her haircut, posture, clothing, and demeanor all defied traditional expectations, and because she refused to adjust herself for public approval, every appearance challenged the unwritten rules of conformity. As her influence deepened, discussions about her place in mainstream representation intensified behind closed doors. Her fan base, made up largely of young people experimenting with self-identity, was seen as both a cultural asset and a political risk. Authorities openly encouraged entertainers to promote wholesome values, but Li Yuchun's appeal rested in her ability to break molds rather than reinforce them. The contradiction became glaring. She was being positioned as a national symbol at the same time her image was drifting further from the state's idealized version of femininity. By the early 2000s, China was entering a new cultural phase. Messaging around youth, gender, and representation grew more rigid, and controlling celebrity influence became a quiet priority. Stars were expected to display patriotism, stability, and compliance. Many adapted effortlessly, embracing scripted interviews and patriotic stage performances. Li Yuchun did not. She kept her distance from political narratives, avoided shaping her image around national messaging, and remained true to the minimalist, introspective persona that had defined her career. She wasn't hostile, just unaligned. And in a system where lack of alignment can appear as resistance, her authenticity became a problem. As external pressure grew, her image underwent subtle adjustments. Promotional materials softened her androgyny. Media coverage framed her as a creative artist rather than a cultural disruptor. But these shifts were surface level. At her core, she remained the same icon who refused to fit into the expected template. This tension between who she was and what she was expected to represent turned her into an unpredictable political symbol, admired by audiences, but increasingly inconvenient for the machinery managing China's cultural narrative. Her transformation from superstar to political symbol wasn't intentional. She didn't seek controversy or aim to challenge authority. She simply stayed true to her identity, but in a country where image shapes ideology, even authenticity can become political. And the more she influenced a generation searching for alternative ways to define themselves, the more the system began to question the cost of allowing a figure like her to remain at the center of the national stage. The year 2012 marked a turning point not only for China's political landscape, but also for its cultural ecosystem. Entertainment was no longer treated as a loose mixture of artistic expression and commercial success. It became an instrument of social guidance. Celebrities were expected to fit neatly into a framework of positive energy, national harmony, and clearly defined moral presentation. That shift, invisible to the public at first, would gradually reshape the fate of nearly every major star in the country. And for someone like Li Yuchun, whose image defied conventional norms, the new environment became increasingly restrictive. Her androgynous style, once celebrated as modern and edgy, found itself under a spotlight for very different reasons. Regulators and cultural commentators began expressing concern over entertainers who blurred gender boundaries. While no policy explicitly named her, the message was unmistakable. Public figures were expected to reinforce traditional values, not complicate them. The very traits that had made Li Yuchun a generational icon, confidence, neutrality, independence, were now interpreted as deviations from the idealized youth role model the country wanted to promote. Television producers, once eager to feature her, became cautious. Casting her in major broadcasts suddenly carried political risk. Large events, especially national galas or state-linked shows, prioritized performers who embodied the kinds of images the government wanted to amplify Li Yuchun. With her stripped-down fashion, short hair, and minimalist emotional tone no longer fit the template. It wasn't that she was banned. It was that she became misaligned with a cultural directive that valued conformity over individuality. Meanwhile, the entertainment market itself was reshaped by new rules. Young idols manufactured through state-approved systems began occupying the center stage. Their images were carefully curated, patriotic, delicate but traditional, easy to control. In contrast, Li Yuchun represented organic fame, the kind that grows directly from public sentiment rather than institutional design. That kind of fame is powerful, but in a shifting system, it is also dangerous. She had built a career on authenticity, but authenticity became a liability. Her declining presence wasn't immediate. For a while, she continued releasing music, attending global fashion events, and maintaining her loyal fan base. But the gap between her public persona and the direction of the national entertainment industry widened year by year. International brands still adored her, especially those seeking to align with progressive aesthetics. But their enthusiasm only made domestic regulators more cautious, a star who appealed too strongly to global trends, while drifting from domestic messaging often found themselves under scrutiny. Inside the industry, whispers circulated about increasing oversight over gender presentation. Producers were reportedly asked to avoid promoting ambiguous images. Music shows became more conservative with styling guidelines. Even visual algorithms on television broadcasting began favoring performers who fit more traditional looks. The cultural wave that Li Yuchun had once ridden now turned against her. By 2013, she appeared less frequently on mainstream Chinese television. Coverage of her activity subtly shifted from celebratory to neutral, then to minimal. Every absence signaled something deeper. She was no longer a priority. Her influence, once seen as an asset, now seemed like a challenge to the system's attempt to redefine what public figures should represent. The shift after 2012 didn't destroy her career overnight. It simply placed her in an environment that no longer had a room for a star who blurred lines, challenged archetypes, and symbolized personal identity over collective messaging. And with every passing month, the gap between her authenticity and the cultural direction of the nation grew too wide to bridge. By the time 2014 arrived, the next phase, her disappearance, was no longer a surprise to those paying attention. It was the quiet result of a system recalibrating itself, and an artist refusing to recalibrate with it. By the time 2014 arrived, Li Yuchun's career was still financially powerful, globally visible, and supported by a fiercely loyal fan base. Yet her presence inside China's mainstream entertainment machine was already weakening. What happened next wasn't a scandal, a downfall, or a controversy. It was something far quieter, far more calculated. A disappearance engineered not through punishment, but through removal. Not a fall, but a soft erasure. The year began normally. She released music, appeared at select fashion events, and maintained visibility through commercial partnerships. But beneath the surface, the industry around her had changed. Producers who once fought to book her stopped calling. Major televised shows, especially those with political or cultural significance, no longer included her name among their guest lists. Invitations that had been automatic for nearly a decade suddenly evaporated. Even industry insiders didn't know whether this was a temporary shift or a quiet directive, but they recognized the pattern. When a star begins appearing less without explanation, the message is rarely accidental. Fans first noticed the absence during the year-end televised events. Li Yuchun, a regular presence for almost a decade, was missing. Then, music competitions stopped citing her as an influence media outlets, which once covered everything from her fashion choices to her charity work, wrote fewer articles. Interviews disappeared. Even minor promotional appearances felt toned down, almost strategically small. There was no official statement, no announcement of a break, and no public acknowledgement, just a gradual, unmistakable fading. Behind the scenes, sources whispered about quiet conversations between her team and cultural regulators. The message, while never publicly confirmed, was clear. The industry wanted her to adjust her styling, adjust her public image, adjust how she represented womanhood, adjust the identity that had made her famous in the first place. And when she didn't or couldn't, the system adjusted her visibility instead. It wasn't that she stopped working. It was that the scale of her work changed. Her concerts became rarer, her public appearances more selective. Instead of leading major televised stages, she performed only at isolated events where cultural influence was limited. Instead of starring in high-profile campaigns within China, she focused on international fashion partnerships that didn't require domestic media support. She wasn't banned, she wasn't condemned. She was managed, quietly, subtly, and effectively. The disappearance also coincided with the rise of new celebrity categories engineered to fit the nation's shifting priorities. Younger idols were heavily promoted, their images curated to align with state messaging about youth role models. They smiled more, spoke more, performed gratitude more. Compared to them, Li Yuchun seemed distant, unpolished, and too independent. The system rewards predictability. She offered none. A major turning point came when television shows began enforcing stricter guidelines on gender presentation. These rules weren't publicly attributed to her, but the timing was unmistakable. Stars, whose aesthetics resembled hers, short hair, neutral styling, androgynous presentation, found themselves pushed toward more traditionally aligned appearances. Those who complied continued rising. Those who didn't found their opportunities shrinking. Li Yuchun quietly fell into the latter category. The effect was immediate. Within a single year, she went from omnipresent to almost invisible. A superstar who once filled stadiums became someone whose name appeared only in fashion magazines or international campaigns. To the casual public, she seemed to have stepped back voluntarily. But to those who understood the industry's inner workings, her disappearance followed a pattern familiar to artists whose identities conflicted with cultural directives. Li Yuchun didn't fall. She didn't fade. She was repositioned, deliberately, gently, and with enough plausible deniability that no one could point to a moment and say, "This is where it happened." But the absence spoke for itself. By 2015, the superstar who once defined a generation was no longer at the center of China's cultural conversation. She had become a shadow, still iconic, still wealthy, still admired, but kept at a distance from the spotlight she once owned. Li Yuchun's disappearance wasn't caused by a single event. It was the result of a convergence, a tightening cultural climate, shifting political expectations, and an identity that no longer fit the image authorities wanted to project through their celebrities. Her silence after 2014 was not the silence of someone who retired, but the silence of someone strategically removed from the center of influence. And when we look closely at the forces shaping China's entertainment industry at that time, the reasons behind her vanishing become clearer and more revealing. The first reason was ideological. As China intensified its efforts to reshape youth culture, public figures were expected to embody very specific traits: patriotic enthusiasm, traditional values, and sharply defined gender identities. The androgynous aesthetic, once tolerated, even celebrated, suddenly became a risk factor. Artists with ambiguous expression found themselves under scrutiny, not because they broke any laws, but because their image complicated the message the state wanted to send about role models. Li Yuchun stood at the center of this shift. Her haircut, clothes, posture, and stage presence symbolized a kind of freedom that regulators believed could mislead young audiences. And when cultural policy tightens, symbolism becomes more important than talent. The second reason was influence. By 2014, Li Yuchun had become more than a singer. She was a cultural blueprint. A generation of young people saw her as the permission they needed to step outside traditional boundaries. When a celebrity begins shaping identity at a national scale, especially an identity that challenges established norms, the system watches closely. Her fan base had grown too large, too loyal, and too emotionally connected. Influence is power, and power outside institutional control is something the entertainment system tries to neutralize, not nurture. The third reason came from global visibility. While domestic regulators were growing uncomfortable with her image, international brands were embracing her more than ever. Chanel, Givenchy, and other luxury houses saw her as a perfect ambassador of modern Chinese creativity, someone who projected confidence without needing to conform. To regulators, however, global adoration complicates domestic expectations. An artist promoted abroad, whose strongest support comes from Western fashion media, can easily be viewed as misaligned with national image building. Her rising international influence created attention. She symbolized modern China to the world, but not the version of modern China the state wanted to present. The fourth reason was her refusal, quiet but firm, to reshape herself. Other stars adapted to the new environment by adjusting their styling, performing patriotic enthusiasm, or altering their public persona to align with expectations. Li Yuchun didn't. She remained stylistically neutral, emotionally restrained, and artistically independent. She didn't broadcast loyalty. She didn't participate in curated campaigns, and she didn't perform femininity the way regulators hoped. That refusal wasn't open defiance, but in a system based on compliance, non-compliance becomes a decision with consequences. Finally, there was the economic factor. After 2014, China's entertainment industry pivoted sharply toward idol groups and highly commercialized youth idols manufactured by production companies. These new stars were controllable, photogenic, politically aligned, and easily replaced. They didn't have the raw, organic power of a phenomenon like Li Yuchun, and that made them preferable. She belonged to an older era of fame, one built not through algorithms or state direction, but through genuine public resonance. In the new entertainment economy, that kind of authenticity became a threat rather than an asset. And so, she was gradually moved to the periphery, not erased, but contained. Allowed to exist, but not dominate. Allowed to appear, but not influence. Allowed to perform, but not define culture. Her silence was manufactured through careful redirection. Fewer broadcasts, fewer major stages, fewer endorsements tied to domestic narratives. Only her music and her international fashion work remained untouched, areas where her identity posed no political challenge. Li Yuchun didn't disappear because she was forgotten. She disappeared because she represented the kind of identity modern China no longer wished to elevate: independent, ambiguous, globally resonant, and uncontrollable. And in a system where cultural expression is inseparable from political messaging, that combination is enough to turn a superstar into a silent icon. Li Yuchun's disappearance was never about talent, popularity, or declining relevance. It was about timing, a moment when China's entertainment industry shifted into a new ideological phase, and a superstar who once symbolized modernity suddenly found herself standing outside the narrative being built. She didn't fall from grace. She didn't lose her audience. Instead, she was quietly moved out of the spotlight because the qualities that once made her extraordinary no longer aligned with the direction the system wanted its icons to take. Her silence after 2014 is a reminder of how fragile cultural power becomes when it collides with political expectations. One moment, a celebrity can define a generation. The next, they can be deemed too influential, too independent, or too unconventional for an era demanding conformity. Li Yuchun paid the price for being herself, for refusing to bend her identity into a shape that felt artificial, for declining to become a symbol she never agreed to be. Today, she remains a legend in the eyes of millions. Her music still resonates, her fashion influence never faded, and her legacy continues to shape young artists who see in her a blueprint for authenticity. But the system that once helped elevate her has long since moved on, choosing safer, more controllable faces to represent the nation's cultural aspirations. In the end, Li Yuchun didn't disappear because she stopped shining. She disappeared because her light could not be dimmed, only moved out of sight.